The Cold War was a period of intense political and military tension between the United States and Soviet Union, and the space race was a major arena of competition between the two nations. Both countries sought to demonstrate their technological and scientific superiority through the exploration of space. Driven by a fierce competitive spirit and plagued by corruption, the Soviets pushed the boundaries of technology and human endurance in their quest to beat the Americans to the stars. But the price of progress was high, as every death in space until 1967 was that of a Russian cosmonaut. Come along with us as we uncover the darkest moments of the Soviet space program and pay tribute to the brave men who lost their lives in the pursuit of space exploration. One of their key spacecraft was the Soyuz, designed to replace the aging Vostok and compete with the American Apollo program. But in 1967, the Soviet leadership grew impatient with the delays in the Soyuz program and sought to make a bold statement to the world. On April 1967, Soyuz 1 was launched into space at an incredible speed of over 8,000 miles per hour, with cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov at the helm. A skilled test pilot, Komarov's mission was to guide the spacecraft into low Earth orbit and await the launch of a second craft, Soyuz 2. Once both vessels were in their correct orbits, the cosmonauts were set to make history by attempting the first ever spacewalk. The mission for the two crew members of Soyuz 2 was to guide their spacecraft toward Soyuz 1 and perform the dangerous and highly technical maneuver of docking the two crafts together. However, as Soyuz 1 stabilized its orbit around the planet, the launch of Soyuz 2 was abruptly cancelled due to technical failures. This left the lone cosmonaut, Komarov, aboard Soyuz 1 in a perilous position as he orbited Earth alone. He was forced to abort his mission and attempt to bring the spacecraft back to Earth solo. As he prepared to begin his descent, disaster struck once again when the automatic navigation system guiding the craft failed. Hurtling around the Earth at thousands of miles per hour, Komarov had to manually steer the craft without any navigational aid. Despite the overwhelming odds against him, Komarov's skills as a pilot shone through as he managed to stabilize the craft's trajectory and begin the descent back to Earth. However, as he entered the Earth's atmosphere, the worst occurred when the main parachute that was meant to slow his descent failed to open. Plunging towards the Earth at a high speed, the craft was completely unresponsive, and there was nothing Komarov could do to save himself. The craft crashed into the ground at 130 feet per second, and Komarov was killed instantly. One of the officials in charge of the rescue mission at the crash site later described the tragic scene, stating that they discovered Komarov's body 1 hour after they began to clear the debris. The official went on to say that at first it was hard to distinguish what were his head, arms, and legs due to the severe impact of the crash. In the aftermath of the disaster, Soviet officials attempted to suppress many of the true details of the incident from the public, including Komarov's final moments. They attempted to downplay the event and claimed that Komarov had become unconscious as his craft hurtled towards the Earth. However, the reality was far different. As Komarov plunged towards his death, he was heard over the radio crying out in rage, cursing the people who had put him inside the flawed spacecraft. He informed Mission Control that he knew he was about to die and that the men on the ground were responsible for his death. His wife was also on the call and asked what she should tell their children, to which his last words were, "Heat is rising in the capsule." In 1969, the Soviet Union's dream of being the first nation to land on the moon was shattered when American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin successfully landed on the lunar surface. Determined to not be defeated, the USers shifted their focus to launching the first space station, called Salyut 1, in 1971. Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Patsaev were selected to be the first men to enter the new station via the Soyuz 11 spacecraft. On June 6, 1971, the cosmonauts launched on board Soyuz 11, with the plan of spending 3 weeks orbiting the Earth. However, the intense pressure from the Soviet High Command led to the testing phase of both the Salyut space station and the Soyuz spacecraft being rushed, resulting in both crafts being launched with known design flaws. On June 7th, the crew successfully docked to the space station and began a 3-week mission of scientific experiments and observations of Earth from orbit. Tragedy struck on June 11th when a fire broke out in the space station, and the crew barely managed to keep the fire from spreading in the high-oxygen environment. Mission Control debated whether to scrub the mission, but decided to proceed as the stakes were too high for a second cancelled mission. Just 2 months earlier, the spacecraft Soyuz 10 had failed to dock with this Salyut space station due to a design flaw in the docking mechanism. On June 29th, the 3 cosmonauts prepared for their final departure from the Salyut 1 space station, loading scientific specimens and equipment into the Soyuz 11 spacecraft. They transferred manual control back to their craft and began the undocking maneuver. However, as the craft began its descent, radio contact was suddenly lost, leaving mission control to track the descent via radar. The craft landed in the northern Kazakh region, and a recovery team made their way to the small town of Karazhai to extract the crew from the capsule. But as the team approached the capsule, they received no response from the crew. Prying open the doors, the team made a gruesome discovery. 2 of the men were slumped over in their seats, completely motionless, with blue faces and blood streaming from their ears and noses. All 3 cosmonauts were dead. It was later determined that there was a problem with a breathing ventilation valve, and that 2 bolts that were meant to fire sequentially fired simultaneously, creating a force that loosened a seal needed to adjust the pressure in the cabin. Rapidly losing pressure, the men had only 20 seconds to locate the valve and close it before the effects of oxygen starvation made it impossible for them to function. Patsaev's body was found positioned near the valve. The tragic death of the Soyuz 11 crew was a devastating blow to the Soviet space program and to the families and loved ones of the cosmonauts. Data from one of the men's biomedical sensors revealed that he went into cardiac arrest within 40 seconds of pressure loss, dying of asphyxiation shortly after. The Soviet state media attempted to downplay the tragic events of the mission, instead emphasizing the accomplishments of the crew during their stay aboard Salyut 1. But the true cause of death was not revealed until 2 years later. In an act of unity, in 1971, a plaque was laid on the moon by the American crew of Apollo 15, dedicated to those who had died in the space race. The names of Komarov, Dobrovolsky, Patsaev, and Volkov are now permanently etched on the moon as a testament to their sacrifice.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories.